Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this Genio webinar about how Volunteer State Community College successfully transformed their approach to student support, ultimately significantly improving student retention, enhancing overall student success, and reducing stress for hundreds, if not thousands, of their learners. Also joined by Leslie Smith of Volunteer State Community College. She's the manager of the Access Centre there, and she's going to be joining us a little bit to chat about her experience and what they've done to improve student persistence. Leslie, do you want to come say hello and introduce yourself?
Hello, it's nice to see you all here today. I'm really excited about this. I think I've got some things that I can share with you that will help you get on the same path that we have gotten on this past year.
Dive into this more deeply, and Leslie's going to share her perspective on what's been effective and what's working well at Volunteer States.
So yeah, we will get started. So the first question that I have for you today, Leslie, is what were the most significant challenges you and your team were facing daily before Genio Notes? Can you please just talk us a bit through that old process?
Oh, absolutely. As Patty mentioned, we were using a volunteer peer note-taking program where the instructors were asked to locate note takers in the classes and then to make copies of those notes, distribute them to the students who needed notes in the class, and to also keep up with those notes and make sure that the notes were good, that they were quality notes that were effective for the students in their classes. And there were just so many challenges with that type of a program that, I mean, they're almost too numerous to name. But number one, I've always been, for the last 36 years, I've been at an institution that has an open admissions policy. So we always have a lot of students who come in who are struggling students. They may not be the best students. And it's also overwhelming to many of those students to take on additional work in a class. And even though they were doing their own notes, that put a lot of pressure on them to try to keep up with those notes. And then, of course, it was not always fair to expect a peer note taker to be in class every single class, because let's face it, life interferes. We have things that come up, and we would have note takers that wouldn't show up, and then the students would be without notes. And sometimes too, if the note takers would leave class immediately, then there might be a delay of a couple of days before they would actually get the notes. So they might not even get the notes until the next day they return to class, which is already late for that next day's lecture. So that was pretty problematic. And then we had students who had a lot of processing issues. And we would seek out the very best note takers, the best students in the classes, and they might interpret the lecture material differently than those students would. And if the students also had processing issues on top of that, they were constantly trying to sort through those notes and make sense of them. And so there was a comprehension issue on top of it. Well, and then let's go to the faculty. The faculty were really sometimes even offended that we asked them to locate note takers in the classes. So they very begrudgingly would find note takers. But then on top of that, they didn't keep up with the notes. They didn't make sure the students were receiving the notes. They weren't evaluating those notes to determine if they were effective.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we hear that a lot in general across many institutions that we do work with. And I guess just a question here, have you, like, what did you do to make sure that students were used to maybe the transition from a peer note taker to using a note-taking software like Genio, or back then even Sonocent Note Taker? Because I know that sometimes students are a bit resistant to change or what they're not comfortable with.
Well, it was difficult at first because I mean it's change. And so a lot of students and many students with disabilities are very hesitant to receiving change. And so we would really have to work with them a lot to get them used to doing things a different way. And when it was just the students with disabilities who had access to the technology, they still felt outed. I mean, they felt outed with the peer note takers because then people would know that they were receiving notes. And even when we tried to maintain confidentiality, that didn't work very well with the peer note taking system. While it was kind of hard to maintain confidentiality, even with the technology, if only Access Center students were using it. And so the students who would adopt it would say, oh my gosh, this is really great. I really am enjoying using this. But I decided to stop using it because students were asking me, what are you using? How do I get that myself? And I'd have to tell them that only Access Center students could use it. And so that was a really difficult thing. But it was a major transition in the way students viewed using the technology when we went to a site-wide license, and then they could say, everybody's using it. And so, I want to be a part of everybody using it.
So the next question I would like to ask you, which I know that you have pretty much covered this in your previous answer, but what was the aha moment for you specifically, or even members of your team? And what made you realize that maybe the existing model wasn't enough and that you needed to find a new solution? So I know you touched
Oh,
upon pricing and looking into that, but was there anything that really stood out that maybe you needed a software like, I guess, Audio Note Taker at that time?
yes. Um, in addition to what I've already mentioned, it really wasn't just an aha moment. It was, oh my gosh, I have the best opportunity. I have a great opportunity before me right now, and I need to take advantage of it. And that was when our Vice President for Academic Affairs came to me and said, the faculty don't really like the way you have note taking set up. It just puts too much of a burden on them. And I can understand that. They've got a lot that they have to attend to. And so he said to me, they're complaining about the quality of notes they're getting. They're complaining about having to find somebody themselves. Can't you just advertise and pay note takers to come in? And it was like, that's a whole nother issue in and of itself. And so in this situation, I really decided to present it from a fiscal point of view. So that was going to be burdensome on us, as well as the institution, if we had pulled in like HR to help with that, or financial aid with, work study students, that type of thing. It was going to be really burdensome for that. Plus, if we only paid them a $50 stipend for 4 classes, you're talking about over $17,000 would have had to outlay to pay paid note takers for 4 classes, a $50 stipend for 89 students, and that's one semester.
Yeah.
And then you times that by 2, you're talking about over $35,000. So it was really a no-brainer, and I usually hate that term, but it didn't take a lot of thought for the vice president to say, hey, I'm okay with helping you get the financing for 25 licenses. Let's try it out. That was $2,500 a year. They didn't even think twice about that. But we still struggled with that because there were so many of our students who even felt singled out from the Access Center of this. So we were able to expand that to 250 licenses, but we still could not get that usage that we wanted to. We were only getting out of those 250 licenses, maybe 60 or 70 students who were using it. And we knew that it really needed to go further. And then when we started seeing all of the data that you all were providing about the number of students who do not self-identify because they don't want to stand out, who have disabilities, or some of what we were encountering were students who came to us who either didn't have documentation or had never been diagnosed, but were still struggling and thought they might have a disability, but they really didn't have the resources to be able to obtain documentation or find out for sure they had a disability. And that's when we started looking at the site-wide license. And
Yes, completely makes a lot of sense. And I think it's easy to forget, especially, as I work for Genio, how many people are involved in that process of getting, even Genio for your department over the line, never mind for an institutional wide license.
mm,
Not to jump too much ahead for questions that are yet to come, but how did you find that process apart from, I guess, the numbers? How did you find that process of getting people involved and speaking to the right people and kind of putting the benefits and the numbers in front of them?
yeah. Well, IT was a major influence. So they were big supporters. And then just finding some individual faculty who had seen some of the difference with our students. And they became kind of ambassadors for us and were supportive. And that was just the starting point, just the very beginning. And then the students too, who felt that it really made a difference for them, um, that was, the starting point as to how we could really start to push for, if it can benefit these few students, how can it benefit all of our students?
I know that a few institutions that we work with sometimes don't even know where to start. It's something that they're really interested in. They see the benefits. They would love to, have Genio across campus, but sometimes do struggle with knowing where to start or who those contacts should be. When you were considering Genio Notes, what was the core problem you were trying to solve from an institutional perspective? Were you thinking about scalability, efficiency, or something else?
Um, Efficiency, definitely. I mean, it was just taking up so much time, and we had to expend so much effort just to be able to, referring back to the peer note taking uh, process and being able to keep up with that. And it was a continual process and a continual effort expenditure on our parts. And so staff really needed to be freed up to be able to do other things, to do problem solving with students and just to be able to focus on a single accommodation was a lot just right there. So just the efficiency of it. Plus, I think effectiveness. I mean, peer notes are just not effective for some students. And, the quality of the notes, students being able to comprehend the way other students are interpreting lectures, and, the effectiveness was nowhere near where we needed it to be. And then, of course, that bleeds into the cost effectiveness and how we could expand that and improve retention across the board and be able to do that in the most cost effective way. And I knew that we were not going to be able to do that in the Access Center alone, especially if we were going to expand that campus wide. I mean, it was more than just an Access Center issue. And the director, our chief information officer, the director of IT, came to me and said, you know something, I don't see why this couldn't come through TAF funds, our technology access fees, which are a part of the student fees that every student pays every time they enroll in classes in each semester. Because if this is going to benefit all students, then maybe it should be coming from the TAF funds. And that too, if you want to talk about aha moments, was, oh yes, maybe that's where it could come from. Um, I was able to get it, but only on a temporary basis, a trial basis. And they said, okay, we're still not completely sold on this. So we will give you the funding for an institutional license for one academic year. But even then, I only had one semester because the next semester, I had the fall semester to look at and check out the data. But then when it came to the spring semester, that's when I had to reapply for the TAF funding and present data that could really convince them. And so that's kind of where I went with that.
When
Mhm.
you had asked for some more data to support those proposals, what were you expecting, or what would have been good to you, or even to those people that proposal go to? Like, what would have been good? Because I mean, 11% is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and that actually came further on down the line because I was always going from the basis of what I was observing, and I had students who were coming into the office from the fall semester to the spring semester that I wasn't even sure would be able to continue
Mhm.
from one semester to the next. And I was really pleasantly surprised that they came in and they said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm back. I didn't think I would be here." And then I also saw that their confidence level was going up and they felt more confident. And I've got a particular student that I want to talk about in a little bit. But they were excited. They were excited about returning. And then we also presented this to, I've got a my accommodations coordinator is also my outreach coordinator. And so she does outreach to the high schools in our 12 county service area for our community college. We all have, in the state of Tennessee, we all have a service area, and ours is a 12 county service area, or excuse me, 11 county service area. And so she was sending out information every month to the special education coordinators and to the high school counselors by email, sending out emails. And she made a point of sending out information about, guess what? We've got Genio. Tell your students all about it. And at that time, there was a trial that they could sign up for it and do like a 30-day trial. And so what we found was even for the fall spring semester, students were coming in from the high schools who maybe graduated mid-year who said, "Oh, I've heard about Genio. I want to find out more about it. I want to be able to use it." So that was something that was, super significant, but it still was just observation. It wasn't really anything that I could put my hands on that I could show them that was significant. So I went to my AVP and she said, "Well, why the heck aren't you going to our institutional research department and asking them to get some data?" And I thought, well, duh, that makes perfect sense. And so what I did was I went to them and I said, "Can you tell me how many students?" And I pretty much said, "All students, how many students persisted from fall semester to spring semester?" And they said, "Well, that data is going to be really murky because you're going to have some students who, of the whole student body, who graduate mid-year. 700 students are going to graduate in December, and so they're not going to persist. So that's not going to be really good quality data. Let's do it from first-time freshman students and who persisted from fall semester to spring semester." And that's when they came back with the students who used the Genio. And we were able to easily get that number because the students have to use their Vol State credentials to be able to download the Genio and to be able to use it. So we have a list of those credentials, and I was able to get just student IDs, give those student IDs to our institutional research department, and they compared that to student IDs of students who were also enrolled for the spring semester. And what they came back with was those students who used Genio, they persisted. They were retained at a rate of 88% compared to 77% of students who did not persist. And I just thought, this is fantastic. If this does not convince the committee, I don't know what will. We also had still, even with all of that, had faculty who were saying, well, we were never asked about Genio to begin with. How do you know what our opinion is? You made that decision without our input. So one of the committee members, who was a representative from the faculty, I worked with him to send out a faculty questionnaire about Genio and their experience with Genio. And that came back. And really, when that came back, it wasn't so much that they were opposed to it, it's that they really either said, I don't know anything about it, or I want to know more about it. So I thought that was significant. So that kind of relieved the minds of the committee members. And
Yeah, yeah. And I know that you and Mary have worked very hard to get the Genio name across campus and across the institution as a whole. And I mean, you two are the main people driving this. And of course, you still have students that you need to provide accommodations to. Is there anybody else involved that helps you with that? Because I think it can seem quite daunting to some of our current customers to try work that out themselves when they already do have their own kind of like initiatives and goals in the department itself.
right. Well, it's really been a campus-wide effort, and as I've talked about, just the supporters who have been behind us, and I my AVP, she uses Genio in meetings. And she has often said, oh my gosh, I have a hard time focusing, especially when there are 10 million people on a Zoom meeting and everybody's talking at the same time and just trying to sort through everything. And she uses it in her meetings. And so I've heard her talking to faculty and staff and students all across campus. Plus, she meets with students who are at risk, who have been referred to the student support offices for some additional support. And I've heard how she has related how Genio is just fantastic and it's something to, so just getting the word out that way. Plus, I don't know how many people are familiar with Slate. But Slate is a customer relations management platform for higher education. And about 4 years ago, Vol State adopted that platform for our admissions process, for a lot of advising process all across campus. And it's a wonderful communications tool. And we don't use it just in our office because, I mean, we use an online platform just for students with disabilities. It helps keep their information confidential, and we send out a lot of our communication through that platform. But it's only for students with disabilities who are actually registered in our office. If they have not completed their registration, then they're not going to get this information either. And we wanted this information to go out campus-wide to everyone. And so I spoke to the staff who work with Slate, and I said, can we get this information? How can we get this information out efficiently to as many students as possible? And everybody's always saying to us, we don't want to overload students with too many emails or too many text messages. But the person who works with Slate said, I've got a plan. I know how we can do this and not overload students, but get the information out to as many as possible. And so in July, what we did last year, and we've done the same thing this year, at the end of July, we put together a Slate email that went to all students who were currently registered for fall semester classes. Well, there's still, oh gosh, over a month of registration still going on. So we knew that wouldn't hit every student. But what she did was she sent out that initial email just to students who were registered on that date. And then she set it up so that Slate would send out that email each week to new students who had registered for classes that week. That way, the ones who had received it previously weren't getting a duplicate, but those students were then the new students, every new student. So we were able to make sure that by the time registration ended, every single student on all 4 Ball State campuses had received that email about Genio.
which is
And
amazing.
on top of it, this year, one of the things we decided to do was to offer in-person training to all students. And we set up a session for new freshmen for the day of new student orientation, for the campus-wide new student orientation. And within a day and a half, less than 48 hours, that session was full. And
Wow.
we put it in one of our big lecture rooms, lecture halls, and that was completely full. We had to we have 2 more sessions that we're in the process of filling. So the word's getting out, that's for sure.
Yeah. Do you have a specific story that a student has shared with you? It could be a bit of a before and after about how Genio Notes made such a difference to their academic journey, whether that be confidence or their ability to persist in education.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've got several students, but one in particular, and I'd like to talk about her because she graduated this past spring semester. And when she started, she was actually a strong student. She was a good student in high school, but she was extremely timid. And she didn't really qualify for, note-taking assistance as an accommodation, but she would go into class and she would struggle to take notes. Um, and she was too shy to really ask an instructor, could you repeat that? I missed it. Or, could you explain something further? So a lot of times her notes were just really lacking. And she was not confident. She would come in frequently and she was, you know, to the point where she was saying, oh, maybe college isn't for me. And I don't know if I can handle this. And we were always trying to encourage her and explain, you can do this. We know you can do this. And so it was right when we really got our Genio in for all students, and we said, you need to use that. And she was really hesitant at first because she said, oh, I don't know. That's something different. It's something more I have to get used to. I don't know if I can do it. And so the first semester she really didn't use it, but then the second semester she did. And when she came back, it was like night and day. She was confident. She felt like she really knew what she was doing in class. Her grades, even though they were good, solid grades to begin with, they started to improve. She was English as a second language student. And it really helped her to be able to sort through the materials and look through the transcript and listen to, portions of the recording to help her get a better grasp on the material and feel more confident with her. And she graduated this past spring with a 3.7 grade point average. So I feel like she is definitely one of our success stories.
So, what advice would you give to a colleague at another institution who is facing the same challenges that you were?
Well, I absolutely do not want to sound redundant, but number one, without a doubt, is garner your support campus wide. The idea that my AVP and VP were on board immediately, and then getting the IT director on board was significant. And as Patty mentioned, having the chair of the faculty senate involved with that and able to present that information. And then the nice thing was she showed up at our faculty presentations about Genio and was able to answer questions as part of we didn't even ask her to be there, and she was there and answered questions and addressed some of the concerns that other faculty members had. Now, we also pulled in our advising center, our professional advisors, because they're high touch. I mean, they meet with a lot of students. And so we're going to be doing more outreach to them this year and doing a private session on Genio for them. And our Learning Commons is our tutoring center. So they see a lot of students. They see a lot of students who struggle. And so getting our tutoring center and the tutors and that staff on board was huge. Without a doubt, designing that robust multimedia campaign. And we hit it from all sides. We did the social media posts, we posted special blurbs on our student portal, we sent emails to the academic divisions. We had resource tables set up at our resource fairs at the beginning of both semesters, and we'll do so again. And then, of course, the bulletin boards and the flyers with QR codes on them, we distributed to every campus, as well as, and I can't emphasize enough, that slate. That slate email campaign was significant for us. And then just be sure and offer multiple training opportunities to everybody involved. And we're really going to focus on our faculty this year, but we're not forgetting our students, and we're going to be doing that with students. Sending out any recordings, getting people to download it, talking about it through, discussions through emails and that type of thing. So, I would say if you focus on those three things, and there's lots of ideas from your colleagues. I got ideas from so many of you all, and lots of support from all the Genio people.
Wonderful. I mean, exactly what we like to hear. And big, big thank you. And I do really appreciate your time today, Leslie.
Thank you.